once again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second day of the 4th Chandigarh Art and Heritage Festival, of which today's talk and slideshow by the artist Subodh Kerkar is a major attraction. For most of us, Goa is a holiday destination, its beaches beckoning us to chill out or party our blues away. But for one born to the sea and sand, as Subodh Kerkar is, and into a family for which art is life breath, Goa and its beaches become his muse and inspiration to create wondrous forms on its broad sandy banks, with the rolling waves a sonorous backdrop to his thought-provoking installations. His artist father, Mr. Chandrakant Kerkar, initiated him early into expressing his thoughts through colors and pigments. So by the time Subodh was in his teens, his masterly watercolor landscapes were gracing the halls of art galleries in Goa. Exhibiting academic brilliance as well, he graduated in medicine and worked as a doctor for 6 years. The lure of art, however, could not be denied, and though he had been freelancing as an illustrator and cartoonist, he finally said goodbye to the medical profession in favor of his true calling, visual art. After a stint at the Dale Carnegie Syndicate in Germany as an illustrator for management books, he returned to Goa, where he now lives and works, having set up the Kerkar Art Complex at Kalangute in Goa. For the past 20 years, he has experimented with different media, creating a niche for himself, especially in the field of land art and installations. Desirous of portraying the picturesque, landscape artists have generally erased the political in their works. Subodh Kerkar, however, infuses the political into the picturesque and decorative elements of his works, creating aesthetic structures that make conceptual, material, and historical statements as well. Choosing not to confine his art within the walls of galleries, he often makes the seashores his canvas, so that passers-by become not just passive spectators, but collaborators in his work and his vision. This is evident in his installation, Unfolding of a Dream, in which thousands of lungtas, that is Tibetan prayer flags, that flutter across the hills of McLeodganj and Gangtok were transported by him to Goa's Vagator beach, articulating in a spiraling symphony of color the Tibetans' struggle for freedom and drawing not just local people towards their cause, but also voicing the ocean's prayer for the freedom of the snow. Kerkar says that his artistic journey is full of many voyages that he has ventured on, discovering, like Columbus, islands that perhaps he had not intended to discover, or that were not islands at all. His fascination with materials has led him to experiment with what is seen as mundane. Discarded tires, for instance, that he saw in a reused in a shop in Jaipur. His sculptures with old wooden canoes are imbued with memories of fishermen's nets, their songs, adventures, anxieties, and joys. Materials, he says, have stories embedded in them. Among Kerkar's other major works are Goa Reloaded, The Presence of the Absence, Earth Bowl, etc. Awarded the Busan Biennial Award in 2006 and a prize for the best presentation at the Kala Akademi art show held in Goa in 2000. He's also been a part of many national and international exhibitions and art fairs in India, Germany, Portugal, and Dubai. Ladies and gentlemen, to experience the majesty of Subodh Kerkar's installation art, may I request your fullest attention and cooperation.
This year is the 4th edition of the Chandigarh Arts and Heritage Festival, which was started 4 years ago. Nature, Prakriti, Kudrat. So everything happening in this particular festival is revolving around this particular concept, whether it's an exhibition or a dance performance or theatrical activities, whatever is happening is revolving around this theme. For this, we thank Professor Goswami, who has spared so much of his time and energy over the last 15-20 days that he's been, and we've come out with a very beautiful book in the shape of a catalog of Bireswar Sen's exhibition, which was opened yesterday at the Alliance Francaise. And it's a very, very special exhibition, only 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, small landscape miniatures, which Bireswar Sen painted, who passed away in 74 at the age of about 85, 86. It's a very, very special treat, and there are magnifying glasses kept there for you to see the details of the paintings. And we also have Subodh Kerkar's photographs of his earlier installations and the installation which he created here in Chandigarh day before yesterday. That is there to be seen, and it will be there till the time it lasts, the vagaries of the weather. But the exhibition is also very special. Then we have an art workshop which is going on with 7 young students. In fact, almost all of them are the students of College of Art. We have invited them to paint in the workshop. Tomorrow, we have a demonstration in watercolor by Subodh at around 11:30 in the morning. I wouldn't say much about Subodh because Mrs. Iqbal Judge has already introduced him to you, but I sincerely welcome Subodh. I've been to his studio. I've seen his works there also. The moment I saw his works, I was really, really hooked on that he should come here. His coming here was a little bit, hurried, because we really wanted to have during this festival, जो कि धरती से, ज़मीन से, आसमान से, कुदरत से जुड़ा हुआ है, इसके लिए इनका होना बहुत ज़रूरी था. He is actually given a different kind of hue to the whole atmosphere. Now I invite Subodh to begin his presentation.
Professor Goswamiji, Mrs. Ninette Sharma, the Chairman of Lalit Kala Akademi, Mr. Diwan Manna, Mr. Johny ML, Mrs. Judge, all the dignitaries in the audience, students, teachers, and I must say also the ghost of Corbusier. Because in Chandigarh, it is impossible to do anything without basically paying certain kind of a respect to the memory of Corbusier. Thank you very much for inviting me here in this very august gathering to speak about my work. After traveling many cities of the country, when you come to Chandigarh, there's a great relief because you don't see any kind of plastic anywhere on the road. So I really congratulate the people of Chandigarh and the administration of Chandigarh, and as Mr. Goswamiji has rightly called this nature, Prakriti and Kudrat. I said हमने कुदरत की दुआ, कुदरत को दुआ देनी चाहिए कि चंडीगढ़ वासियों ने, the nature of Chandigarh Vasi is very much favorable to Prakriti. I have been walking early morning with my friends in the gardens here. There is a bougainvillea garden, there is a rose garden, there are many other gardens. And as a land artist, my feelings when I walk there are like a child in a mithai shop or a chocolate shop. My mouth waters because Chandigarh offers, these gardens offer such a great venue for public art. They're waiting for public art, and I will definitely request the administration here that one should not keep these wonderful spots hungry. Mr. Corbusier, I was told, was against statues here, sculptures here, but I think it is a little bit misunderstood. He was against having sculptures of netas, portraits of netas. He was not against contemporary sculpture. The only contemporary, there are of course quite a few contemporary sculptures here, but I was quite shocked and amazed to see Eiffel Tower not too far from here. Perhaps that is allowed because Corbusier was French. Well, with that, let me come to my subject. I have been very, very close to my father. My father was a school teacher. He was an artist. From the age of 6 to 16, I walked with my father every day on the beach. Even on the first day before the SSC exams, even on that day, we went for a walk. So those walks were so very important. And I'm very much attached to him. He passed away 4 years ago. He was a very timid man, but he gave me a lot. He gave me what he had, and he also gave me what he did not have. He gave me a lot of confidence. He gave me a lot of dreams. And so whenever I begin any presentation, I always pay my respect to my father. What I did was, because we walked on the beaches, we walked on the riverside, we walked on the hills, I made 500 portraits of my father and planted them on all the places I walked. So I will begin with this installation and then go on. This is a favorite banyan tree. Well, this is somewhere near north of Goa, where there's a small village called Keri where we lived. This is the riverside where we walked. I learned a lot of things from my father. We would walk on the seaside, and I would sit down there on the beach, walk on the beach, and I would look at the waves. The waves broke, and the surf went onto the sand, wetting the sand. And I used to observe those waves. Most of the waves came and they wet the same sand which was wet before. And then a big wave would come, break, hurry onto the sand, and wet new sand. And my father told me, son, basically in whatever you do, you have to be that wave. Whether it is in our career as an artist or as an author, as a musician, what is most important is to wet new ground, wet new wave. And that is a lesson which I think I learned from my father, one of the most important lessons during those walks. This was my first installation. This was actually almost accidental. I had created some large copper discs as lights for a project, and then I just thought I will just take them to the beach and try out something. And I went to the beach, we made a crater in the sand, and I had this disc on the top of it with the electrical cable running into the sand, and we took an electrical connection from a beach shack. And when it was dusk, I just put the lights on, and this was the effect. I was myself surprised at this. I felt almost like a god, because it was like creating a new planet. And that's why I call this the 10th planet. Now, before I move forward, I must tell you the basic concept of what is land art. Now, many people say, are you a landscape architect? Are you do you do landscaping? Now, there's a very important difference between landscaping and land art. Land art is basically, the concept of landscape started with Constable. Before Constable, landscapes were hardly painted. Landscapes were basically backgrounds for portraits. Landscape by itself was not considered to be a subject for art. But Constable changed that, and many other artists later on changed that. But most of the artists depicted a landscape. What I do, what land artists do, is not depicting the landscape, but engaging the landscape. The landscape becomes part of the work. Landscape is not just a canvas. Landscape is both inside and outside the work. So land art is basically a dialogue, or installation art is a dialogue between the artist's creation, the landscape, and the audience. So it's a three-way traffic in a kind of art which I pursue. Well, all of us as kids, especially those who live on the seaside or the riverside, the first sculpture they do is a cone. I must have done many cones during my childhood. So I did a cone, and we had a little moat, and I lit it up with electrical lights. And so this is a memory of the cones which I had made during my childhood. So most of my work has some kind of a memory concept connected with it. They are kind of mnemonic devices. This is again sand with just mussel shells and a light inside. When the sun sets, you see a triangle of light reflected on the surface of the sea, surface of the water. Every child, when they are asked to paint a sunset, they paint this triangle. So I thought maybe the sunset is also remembered by the sand. So I just made these grooves in the sand and had them lit. So this is sort of a memory of sunset as remembered by the sand. Well, this is one of my favorite installations. The tides, as you know, are caused by the moon. So on this beach, which is called Goa Vella, which is not too far from Goa's airport, I created a circle which represents the moon with the shells which I collected from the beach. And then I waited for the tides to come. This was done during the low tides. So when I do my work, I have to be very careful. I have to basically study the tide situations. So I'm almost like a fisherman of art. When they go out to fish, they have to consider the tides. So I also consider the tides when I do my work. So this is the moon. And then the tide comes and engulfs the moon, which is responsible for creating the tides. The creator of the tide is engulfed by the tides. Well, I have done many works with shells, mussel shells and other kind of shells. Now, you might ask me, okay, why do you do this? Well, is it just because it looks good? Is it just decoration? Well, it is not decoration. Here, there are many meanings at many different levels. One of the interesting things what happens here is, here, the ocean is my inspiration. The ocean is also my theme, because I have created a form of ocean. The ocean is also my canvas, because I have used the sand as my canvas. And ocean is also my medium, because the shells are given to me by the ocean. So there is a wonderful confluence, like the Triveni Sangam, the Chaurangi Sangam of basically the theme, the inspiration, the medium and the canvas. And that's how this work assumes importance. Most of my works has meaning at different levels, as Mrs. Judge already told you. My works are basically they have a lot of social levels, they're political levels, they're conceptual level, philosophical. I'm kind of an I'm an artist and an activist. I take part in many kind of issues in Goa, and so you will come to know about it when I basically proceed with the presentation. So these are basically shells which I did this installation at many places. When I was a doctor and I decided to give up medicine, and I started painting watercolors, most of my patients said, the doctor is just sitting on the roadside and painting, pagal ho gaya hai. And then I started planting shells on the seaside, and they said, abhi to pura kaam kar liya. He's planting shells. Nobody could understand that planting shells could be an activity for somebody who has finished his medicine and is running a hospital. And then I sent this entry to many competitions, and I got the award in the Busan Biennale. I got some 8 lakhs rupees, and people could not imagine that an activity of planting shells could give you such kind of money. Most of my works are ephemeral. They're very temporary. The sea comes and basically destroys, the waves come and destroy my work, and it reminds me of a wonderful poem by Tagore. It says, when the waves write their poetry on the sand, and not satisfied, wipe them off over and over again. So my work is kind of my poetry, and well, I allow the waves to wipe them off, wipe it off again and again. This was done in Dubai. This is again the moon form, and I have to basically work with a lot of people, my colleagues and some art students. And then I converted that into bronze. So I had an opportunity to convert this into bronze. A company from Brisbane in Australia invited me to do this sculpture, and I took some shells from Goa. Some shells were collected in Australia, and then I cast. This is about 5 meters in diameter, and this is installed in Saudi Arabia on the bank of the Red Sea in the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. So you can see the details of the shells. This is another work which I have already finished, but this is a picture only of the maquette. I have done a small maquette. This is again a disc which is convex, and one side is a crescent moon, which is polished, another area is basically shells. And on the other side, the crescent moon is on the other side. That's because in waxing and waning positions, the tips of the crescent are facing, during waxing it is facing the east, and during waning it is facing the west. So basically that's how I've designed this. Well, this is one of my works which is connected with some social issues. One day early morning at about 6 o'clock I was driving, and I suddenly come across hundreds of women with big red tikka with sickles squatting on the roadside. And they are basically women from neighboring areas of Goa, from Maharashtra and Karnataka, who come to harvest our fields. They spend about 15 days in Goa, harvest the fields, because Goa we have very little local labor. Most of the labor comes from outside. And then they sleep under the trees, and since they are not voters, there are no facilities for them. And then there are no toilet facilities, they just under the tree. And I thought I must basically raise this issue. And they come every year, and we have thousands of them coming every year. So I thought I must do something about this. And they wear a sari, which is called Irkali sari. Irkali sari is a particular kind of sari, which is used in this area, border area of Maharashtra and Karnataka. So I went to Belgaum and I bought some 150 saris. And then, while they were working, I hung these saris from the coconut tree. And basically they were fluttering in the wind. And this was sort of celebrating the labor of these migrant women, and also it visually appeared very beautiful, and also drawing the attention of the authorities to this issue. These are the Irkali women. Well, I'm very much against nuclear weapons. On Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I had an opportunity to visit there, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I decided, me and my friends who are activists decided to visit schools and colleges to talk against nuclear weapons. We went to many schools and colleges, and we requested the students to write no to nuclear energy, nuclear weapons on a piece of paper. We first experimented that the paper dissolves in the water. It was a newsprint paper. It dissolves very quickly and sinks. We did that. And we had 2,000 students who gathered on that bridge on the Hiroshima day. And since we have a tradition in Indian scheme of things to make a prayer to the river, this prayer against the nuclear weapons was made to the river, and we had 2,000 students, but we could not really have a proper documentation of this because it was very difficult to control 2,000 students. You can't control your own 2 children. And so it was so difficult that even before the signal was given, they started throwing. So we don't have very good documentation of this work, but you can see there are so many students there. This is one of my favorite works. As I told you before, my work connects with history. Very few of us will be aware that the chilies which we enjoy so much are not from India. The tomatoes and potatoes which have become part and parcel of every vegetarian meal are not from India. The cashew nuts, the tapioca, it is not from India. All these things were brought by the Portuguese somewhere in 1510 or so from different parts of the world, from Africa, from South America. So the food habit of the whole continent was changed by the Portuguese and by the other colonial powers. So tomatoes and potatoes, for example, the tomatoes, the Brahmins refused to eat tomatoes here those days because when you cut a tomato, it is like flesh. They said, we don't eat non-vegetarian. So the food habit of the whole continent and many other, not only India, but many other countries was changed by the colonial interventions. And so I was invited to Lisbon to do an installation in a garden which is called Tapada das Necessidades. This is a garden. Tapada das Necessidades in Portuguese means the garden of necessities. This garden has been existing since 1450. And even there is a chapel in this garden, and the garden has not changed since then. And the chapel, even everybody, including Vasco da Gama, went and prayed at this chapel before they set sail for discovering new lands or on their voyages. And I was invited along with another 4 artists from other parts of the world to do an installation in the garden. So I decided I will take a kind of a poetic revenge on the Portuguese. So I carried rice from Goa and planted it in the garden in Lisbon. But with the rice, I traced the route, the sea route of Vasco da Gama. So he came from Lisbon, went to St. Anne, then he came almost near Brazil, and then went to the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa, then went to Zanzibar, and from there he came to Calicut, and he was guided by an Arab Arab navigator. So when rice grew in Lisbon, in my installation, it just did not sprout rice, it sprouted history. Yeah, this is a Photoshop image, but someone showed it because since I was talking about rice, I have an idea, I have an ambition, I have a plan to sort of, on large landscapes. We have so many large hills. You have hills here. One could do an intervention where you to create a line with trees, for example, with Gulmohar or anything else. And it could be a very interesting installation where you know that is a human intervention there when you see this line. And there are so many lines we could do which respond to the encounters of the hill and the encounters of the landscape and perhaps some issues. Until about 14th century, 15th century, horses were the most important import material in Goa. 50% of the revenue in Goa came only from horses, the Arabian horses. And Goa was important because the Arabian horses were very much in demand by all the South Indian kings, and the ships came to Goa, and the horses were then taken to the ghats, to the Sahyadris, to Belgaum, Hampi, Badami, Pattadikal, Aiole, and the rest of the empires, the rest of the kingdoms. This place where I have done this horseshoe is a place where there was a port, and that is called Goa Pattanam, where I also did the other installation which I showed you. So in memory of these horses, I created this horseshoe. And then again, the waves destroyed. And when I go back now, next week, I'm planning another installation. This is for a work, for an exhibition I'm doing in Berlin at the end of the year. And this exhibition is about basically the ocean as a medium of cultural diffusions. Ocean as a medium of intercontinental cultural diffusions. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do horseshoe created with indigo. Because indigo was something which was exported from here. And horseshoe with indigo, and then, especially in this, with the bright sunlight, to be a very, and then the sea will carry the indigo away, and it's a natural pigment, so I don't think it's pollution. Well, water has been a very important issue. There are even predictions that if we have world wars in the future, they will be fought over water. So I decided to do something with water. I planted this glasses of goblets of water next to the ocean. So this is like a juxtaposition of potable and non-potable water. And then I fixed a video camera. And as the sun, from morning till evening, the goblets, the light in the goblets change, and they were just sort of shining like a jewel when you fast forward the video. I also did some other sculptures connected with this. This is done with fiberglass, and you see the dots on it. The dots on it are again connected with water, because if you have a washing machine, you see the holes in the drum of the washing machine. This is a byproduct of that drum. So in the materials I use, there's always a connection with the work I do. Altar with a drop of water, which I basically had, it's a gold-plated drop. Water is God. It is again created with this stainless steel material, which is a byproduct of washing machine drums. Too many taps. This work here, which I'm going to show you, is connected with the terror attacks on Mumbai, which happened a few years ago. If you have to describe the present world in 2 words, the 2 words are basically terrorism and telecommunication. Never in the history of world, terrorism was so well organized and telecommunication so advanced and so accessible to everybody. Terrorists use telecommunication skills for blasting bombs. It's used for all terror activities. And there is a paradox I see in this, because terrorism is essentially a product of non-communication. Where there is no communication between nations, no communication between religions, no communication between communities, groups, then terrorism comes up. When there's a misunderstanding, no communication, and then terrorists use this communication mediums. I see a big paradox in it. Most of the terrorists who came, there were 10 terrorists who arrived in Mumbai, were hardly 18, 19 years old. I basically believe that an 18, 19 years old boy cannot be a bad boy. He's basically programmed. And a donkey can be programmed to take goods from place A to place B. So what I decided was, a terrorist is basically a robot with a donkey head. So I made 10 masks of donkeys, and we had 10 actors who played a terrorist, and we had a kind of an installation which was kind of a dance of terror on the seaside, because the terrorists came from the sea. So this was a boat with red, and then I had this in action, and this was a video we made with actors wearing these masks. Some of the actors were dancing so beautifully. The video is very interesting, but well, for lack of time, I can't show you the video today. I used the dingy boat in which they came as a kind of a flag for the act. Yeah. So this is a work connected to the Mumbai terror attacks. But this was just a coincidence. When I was doing this, out of nowhere, I saw a he-buffalo coming, and he-buffalo is a vehicle of Yama, the god of death. And so it was totally accidental. I was throwing some pigments in the water, and the he-buffalo came there. So this shot is completely accidental. And then I decided, in India, when somebody is dead, we have a shraddha. After 12th day, we have the pind, the rice balls for the crows to come and feed on. And so I decided to do something with that ritual. And I enacted the Amrita Shegil painting of Brahmins with, in front of it is the banana leaf with the rice balls. So this was again the meaning at different levels. This is another installation of mine which is my favorite, which is not too far from here in Shimla in the Viceregal Lodge. When the partition of India happened, many different things happened. Almost about 3 million people lost their lives, about I think 9 million were displaced. It was the largest human movement in the world. But apart from all this, another very interesting thing happened during the partition. All those places where the Indian culture developed went to Pakistan, and all the contribution of Islam came to India. We had the mother of our civilization, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, is in Pakistan. Takshashila, the great university of those days, is in Pakistan. And Taj Mahal, Fatehpur Sikri, and all the great contributions of Muslims, that's in India. So this was a paradox of history. And if you have to, there's a very nice story how Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro was discovered. This was in 1866. The British were building a railway track from Lahore to Multana. And while building this railway track, the British engineer called Mr. Burton, he was in charge of laying the tracks. And he found that there was one contractor who was selling bricks very cheap, almost half the price from other contractors. He started wondering, how can this guy sell bricks so cheap? And then he realized that he was only, this contractor was digging the bricks from Mohenjo-Daro and selling them to the British Railway. And that's how the excavation was done in 1921. It took quite some years. Even the British bureaucracy was as slow. And they, in 1921, they did the excavation and the great civilization was discovered. And if I have to identify one icon, one symbol of this civilization is the dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro. It's a very, just 8 inches tall sculpture which is in the museum in Delhi. So what I decided was, I made a cutout of this figure on a metal plate, a thick metal plate, and mounted it on 2 railway tracks. And I created a mound in Shimla next to the Viceregal Lodge, and I am calling it basically the presence of the absence. So this is a work which connects with the partition. Since I have already talked about this, I would like to talk to you about another work which I am dreaming I would do. Partition has been a subject I have been studying. I basically believe that it's very important that so much money which is spent on security, on defense by the 2 countries, India and Pakistan, if it is utilized for education and health, I think there will be miracles happening for the 2 countries. It's very important, I believe, that the countries are friends. And so I wanted to create an installation like Joseph Beuys believes that there is a power in art for revolutionizing concept. I also believe in that. And I feel I want to do an installation which is half in India and half in Pakistan. My installation idea is very simple. I want to create one wall in Delhi, and one wall in Islamabad. It's about 20 meters long wall in stainless steel. On the wall in India, I will cut out human forms and forms of architecture, forms connected with India and Pakistan. What I cut from the wall in India, I will take it and place it next to the wall in Pakistan. And what I cut, the cutout from the wall in Pakistan, I would bring it and put it next to the wall in India. So the body is here and the soul is there. It's a kind of a mnemonic device. It's a sculpture which perhaps would achieve some kind of political effect. This is my presence of the absence. The ocean has no boundaries. The ocean connects all continents. Ocean has been, the life originated in the ocean, and the history of human civilization in a way is dissolved in the ocean. I saw a rock in Goa projecting into the ocean. It was like a ramp projecting into the ocean for the waves to stage the catwalk. And during high tide, the waves would come and sort of crevices in the rock would be filled up with water. I decided to carve out a perfect bowl in this rock. When you do interventions in nature, it is very important that there is a symbiotic relationship between your intervention and the nature. It should not be kind of a rape. It should not be a slap on the face of the nature. And here there were already some crevices, so I only made a perfect bowl. And during the high tide, the water would come and collect in it. And my bowl, I call it Earth Bowl. It's a bowl where when the water of the ocean comes in, it precipitates history. It basically precipitates the universal brotherhood. That's why I call it the Earth Bowl. This is in Vagator. It was one of the famous beaches in Goa. A child obliged me with the pose. Yeah, I was talking about issues like using ocean energy for generating electricity. So I've been doing some kind of bulbs which will be lit with ocean energy. I have been a doctor for 6 years and I had many patients. And 1 year I spent basically treating heroin addicts, local heroin addicts in my area. And I found that not a single heroin addict was from the fishing community. Though they were, all the tourists and all the drug scene is on the beach and the fishermen are all the time on the beach, but nobody was from the fishing community. I think the life of a fisherman is so much connected with the ocean, and it is so much, I mean, they have a total inseparability from the ocean. And so I decided I will create some installation using fishermen as my material. So here, I almost half buried a fisherman in the sand. This is kind of an oceanic ritual. The fishermen become the boat. There are shells inside and the boat is created with the bodies, and the fishermen become the fish born. They become the fish. This is again the fishermen. And they were not trained actors or anything. I just went there early morning at 5 o'clock with 50 people and we just enacted all these installations. I call this the This is with palm leaves. There's a tree in the heaven which is called Kalpa Vriksha, and I think the palm tree is supposed to be Kalpa Vriksha on the earth. So it's kind of a celebration of palm trees, ode to the palm trees. So it is about 20 meters long and 9 meters tall. The palm leaves are covered with gold paint and uplit. And then I converted that into bronze. So they are kind of flags of Goa. This is outside one of the Goa Nivas in Delhi. I'm a sympathizer of the Tibetan cause. When I was in Sikkim, I saw, apart from the slopes of the peaks of Himalayas, the flags, the Buddhist flags which are called lungta, fluttering on the slopes of Himalayas, are a very wonderful sight. And the sound it makes is very, very special. And they are usually white or yellow and other colors. And there is a drawing of a horse on every flag, and there is a prayer written on it. And the Tibetans believe that their prayers will be answered with the speed of the horse. And I had never seen any of these flags in Goa on the seaside. Though there is a community of about 300 Tibetans in Goa selling jewelry, the people who do not have their own land. The Tibet is supposed to be the roof of the world. but unfortunately the people from Tibet don't have really a roof over their own head. And so I have a sympathy for the Tibetan cause. And I decided to bring these flags to the seaside and plant them on the seaside, in a way, ocean, praying for the freedom of the snow. And His Holiness Dalai Lama was in Goa for a lecture, and I met him and I explained the concept to him and he blessed it. And he requested his followers to support this project. And we had about 300 Tibetans with mashals, and we had Tibetan monks. I had about 1 kilometer of these flags coming down from a hill and making a kind of a spiral on the beach. And I called it unfolding of a dream. And each flag was lit. And we had Tibetan monks chanting prayers and walking alongside the flags. Well, this is an installation in Dubai. Ever since the days of Mohenjo-Daro, we have had some kind of maritime relationship with the Arabian countries. There are references of Arabian ships coming to Harappa, to Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa during those days. And the trade between these two countries, the horse trade, and continues. And so I decided to celebrate that. So when I was invited to do the installation for the Dubai Art Fair, and the site given to me was next to this Burj Arab, and it was a very difficult site because you have to do something which does not fight with the Burj. So I decided to create these installations, these sculptures with boats, the old boats from Goa, which I carried. The sculptures are made with old boats and copper and glass. This is glass and a boat. There are many levels of meaning in this work because when you are putting glass inside the boat, glass when lit appears like water. So the boat is remembering water, and glass in turn comes from the sand, and glass in turn remembers sand. So it is kind of finding ancestry of materials. This is one of my work. I am talking about using landscape as material, land as material. This work is called The Pillars of the Nation's Conscience. Now you will start wondering, why are the pillars of nation's conscience? You watch it very carefully. I'll give you half a minute. Watch it very carefully, the space between the two pillars. Watch the space between the two pillars. Did you see anything? Gandhiji. Did you see the Gandhiji? So the space between the two pillars is Gandhiji, and here I have created Gandhiji with the elements, with nature. Gandhiji is one with the elements. So basically the air, water and the sky makes Gandhi. That's why the pillars of nation's conscience. And some of my friends said 5 pillars are not enough today. Yeah. This work is already ready. It is waiting for a client, then I can convert it into bronze. I have done it in fiberglass. I was talking about chilies. Chilies came from South America, from Mexico. Nowhere else in the world chilies were grown, and the Portuguese brought chilies here, and now we are the largest producers of chilies in the world. Chilies arrived in India somewhere in 1520. There are some scholars who believe that we had some kind of chilies, and there are references about chilies in Ayurveda. I do not want to go into that controversy. We might have had some chilies, but essentially the Portuguese came here for pepper and for Christ. They came to take pepper from here, and they came to spread Christianity. And the chilies were brought by the Portuguese, and today we have mastered the art of chilies. I think Mexico is nowhere when the amount of chilies we consume. And if at all, if imagine that the word suddenly ends, and then the excavation is done, the reference to chili will be in every menu of every hotel, chicken chili and all chilies. So one line in Ayurveda I think is not sufficient proof that we had chilies. Anyway, so this is a chili, again it's covered with tires, and that is again a reference to, this is a journey of chilies. This I just did last week before coming here, and again a hot chili obliged me. Yeah, the real chili, the circle with chilies. We go. Chilies. Yeah, this is an installation we call for the elements, where I have the flowers representing earth. We have some coal. We had shells. So I like to work with natural materials. This is an installation which I did recently with the Chennai Art Fair. I was asked to create an installation as a memory, in memory of the victims of the tsunami, the Japanese tsunami. They wanted me to do something temporary for the Chennai Art Fair just a few weeks ago. In Japan, in the Shinto tradition, there is this gate called the Torii Gate. You see it in all Japanese pictures. That is called a Torii, T-O-R-R-I-R-I-I, Torii Gate. And this gate is supposed to be a gate between the physical and the spiritual world. And the Japanese believe it's a gate between life and death. So I decided to create this gate with, again, palm with the mussel shells, and it changes. And then I also created a pyramid with the Torii Gate. And on this day after the tsunami, I happened to, I went for a walk in Goa. And this was just a day after tsunami, and I saw sleepers, chappals on this beach. I know that the tsunami never came to the west coast, but I could not help thinking that this belonged to the victims of the tsunami. And so I collected those sleepers, and inside this pyramid, I arranged those sleepers. So this is a kind of a pyramid in memory of those who disappeared in the tsunami. And this is from the other side. Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you very much. I have basically tried to concentrate on basically land art. I do many other kind of work, many different sculptures, but I think it will be nice that today now we could have some question and answer sessions.
I just want to know one detail, like in the work which in the end you showed on the tsunami victims. So you told you collected those chappals.
Yeah.
So those chappals belong to the victims who were sufferers in the Indian tsunami or in the Japanese tsunami? Like
No,
what?
The chappals actually were not from the victims because tsunami never came to the west coast of India. It was only on the east coast.
Yeah.
But when I looked at, this was on the second day after the tsunami, and I was
So
walking
you went
on
to
the
the
beach.
west coast?
Yeah, I live, Goa is on the west coast, so actually they don't belong to any victims, but I couldn't stop thinking that they belong. I think it is very important how you connect it rather than actual, whether it belongs or not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Artist, you're always connected to your creativity and it is almost a part of it, part of you. But doesn't the temporariness of your work bothers you? Like art is something which you want to keep and the others want to see. We see the photographs of your, but you say that the waves destroy and your work gets destroyed. Doesn't that bother you? That you create and then it is not there?
Yeah, well, sometimes it does bother me. We are all temporary. None of us are permanent, so I think there is no permanence. But well, I will quote another poem by Tagore to answer that question. Question was asked to Tagore, a similar question. And the poem in which he expresses the answer is very beautiful. He says, when death knocks on my door and says your time has come, when death knocks on my door and says your time has come, I shall tell death, I never lived in time, I lived in love. And when death asks me, will your work be remembered? Will your work be permanent? I shall say I do not know, but when I created it, I felt eternity.
Is it sponsored by somebody, some organization, or how do you finance all this?
Well, initially when I started my career, I was doing watercolors. These watercolors were selling very well. But after some time, I had the same feeling as when I was a doctor, the routine nature of the work, because I found watercolors I was doing was essentially technique and not art, but they were selling very well. And then slowly I moved to this new media, to installations, and there was a lot of difficulty. I could not make a living, I had to borrow money from friends, but I stuck to it because I believed in it. There were difficulties. Sometimes I had to do some work, other work, which was a little bit of commercial work, like some mural for a hotel or things like this to sustain it. But now things have changed, so I do have enough clients to sustain this. And sometimes some of the work is converted into permanent work. Like this chili which I just showed will be exhibited in Australia in one of the sculpture competitions in November. Then I have an exhibition in Berlin. So now and the problem here is in India, we do not have enough museums. This kind of works are museum works. Nobody's going to put them in their homes. So we need to have many museums. I was recently in Korea, in Seoul. Samsung had a great museum, a private museum totally sponsored by Samsung. I think we have a lot of big companies here, even bigger than Samsung, but unfortunately, I think it is time the corporate investment happens in some kind of museums. Also, government has to wake up, and we need to have many museums. Like, for example, in Chandigarh, we do not have a single museum where you can see works of contemporary Indian artists. I'm not talking about Picasso's, and I'm talking about Indian artists, contemporary Indian artists. I think it's time we have this kind of museums.
Thank
Yes?
you.
सर मैं एक कॉम्प्लीमेंट आपको देना चाहता हूँ. आई रेड इन द मॉर्निंग एंड आई वांट टू शेयर विद ऑल ऑफ यू. जब आपका लक्ष्य पर्सनल होता है, कहते हैं वो आप पे सवार होता है, लेकिन जब वो यूनिवर्सल होता है तो आप उस पे सवार होते हैं. तो ये आप उस पे सवारी करके ये काम देख पाए. व्हेन यू आर यूनिवर्सल तो आप उस लक्ष्य पे सवार होते हैं. एंड आई थिंक दीज आर द क्रिएशन ऑफ दैट वेरी एक्सपीरियंस. When you are riding on something like that, it's wonderful, wonderful.
I loved your work. It's the first time I was seeing such a large panorama of it. One question that comes to mind is that your installations are very fluid. They're very kinetic in the sense that they keep changing their mood, the color, the shadows, with the sun, with the waves, everything. The people who are experiencing it, do they feel compelled to come and participate in this? And is it something that you encourage, a participative form of the installation?
Yeah, very much. I think I have had many installations in public spaces. One of the largest installations I had was half a kilometer long during the International Film Festival. Somehow I had to manage some little money from this sponsor, that sponsor, but I did it for half a kilometer. And people who were never exposed to installations came and saw it. They appreciated it. I had 4 or 5 books full of compliments. One compliment was the BJP government had come in power. So they said BJP is Zindabad. So all kinds of compliments and this kind of things have come. But well, I think people do participate. I believe in intelligence of people. Many times inko samjhega nahi. But the people are very intelligent. They have even intelligence to change governments. So I think they have intelligence to appreciate art, and they have intelligence to participate. They do respond.
Actually, my question is just an extension of the previous question. And there are certain works where you've used people's issues, socio-political issues that you work with. So all of these women who came, who were working, when they saw your installation, what was their reaction? Or when you worked with the masks and the dancers, what was their input to your site-specific and performance in a sense?
Yeah, I must say the women who were just workers, when they saw the saris coming down and I was doing this, I mean, they appreciated it and they liked it, and I told them why I'm doing it. The only stupid question came from one of my journalist friends who said, have you started selling saris? You know, when I was practicing medicine, suddenly there was a boom in tourism. So 50% or about 80% of my patients suddenly became tourists. And 80% of them were British dysenteries. So the idea of spending my lifetime treating British dysentery was horrible. And then I said, India has taken enough shit from the British for 150 years. I need not to take any more.
How do you thematize the critique of mechanization, machinization of the world through your works, on landscape? Like, for one example would be so many structures here is a kind of massification. So would you see your work as being subsumed under this massification, mechanization, or as a critique of that?
No, I have not exactly addressed the issue of mechanization. I mean, it's a very interesting theme. Tagore in the end of his days was very much against this. He thought that the kind of changes happening in the society with too much of mechanization, industrialization is bad. But this issue has not been addressed by me yet, so I think I will not talk on that.
Okay, good evening. I just want to inquire that do you think that your study of medical, studying the physics and chemistry to help you in, studying the gravity and the pigments and all this in your installation, are you thankful to your profession, or do you think it's all shit that, you know, you initially said that, why you left it?
I think no education is a waste. Any study, whatever you read, whatever you study is always useful. For 6 years as a doctor and during medical studies, you have to work very hard, so it teaches you how to work hard. When I was treating patients, delivering babies and presiding over deaths, you are faced with life and death, and that forms your personality, that gives you, teaches you a lot. So I think my being a doctor definitely helped. It was not a waste for me, and in many other ways my knowledge of science helps tremendously. I have not shown those works now, but I do a lot of work connected with science.
Okay, thank you so much.
Some influences that you had that made changes in you from a doctor to a land artist. From doctor, I think being a land artist, you should be having great changes, many changes, and should be a kind of like a spiritual guy. And I can see many filtration from a spiritual content to a political content, many things that happened all around the world. You are not, I can't say that you are not an Indian artist, but you are a global artist.
Yeah, basically I think all of us artists should consider global. We are not artists, we are not
from India or
and Miros of Faridabad. We must have a very open, that's what is important as an artist. We should have a universal viewpoint. We are citizens of the world. I think to be nationalist is not a very nice thing. To be internationalist is a much higher.
And sir, can you please tell us about land art a little bit?
Yeah, well, this was a process I have been learning. I continue to learn. I continue to change. Everyday learning is very, very important. Reading is very important. Like Professor Goswami told us yesterday, that to become a good singer, you need to to study poetry, and all the disciplines are interlinked. And for me, when I started doing my watercolors and I was bored with it, and then I was traveling, I had some opportunities to go to Europe, look at modern art museums. Initially, I understood nothing. When I went to Tate Modern, for example, and saw all those things, because my father had not taught me anything beyond Gauguin. And so when I went to look at these museums, I understood nothing. So I said, either I am a total fool or they are taking me for a ride. So I decided I am a fool. I started learning. I started talking to other artists who knew. I started reading books about it, visiting more museums, and then a kind of a Pandora's box was opened to me. And I started getting goosepimples when I looked at those works. So I think it's a process. What is most important, I think even this categorization as a land artist, I have shown basically today because the topic was about land art. I talked about land art, but I also do many other things. I do mechanical sculptures, I do moving sculptures, so many other things. So it's not very important to totally categorize. I think one should be open, one should be learning all the time.
Your work, it reminds me of the British artist Anthony Gormley.
Andy Goldsworth.
Who works very much like you with the sea. And there's a particular installation near our home called Another Place, which is 100 Iron Men. And it's a permanent installation planted on the beach.
Angel of the North, which is near Newcastle.
The one that I'm talking about is in Southport. It's called Another Place.
Okay.
And it's a fantastic, it's 100 Iron Men, and this tide comes in over their heads and goes out again. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you would collaborate with him?
No, very much.
Welcome anytime.
I'm in touch with Richard Long.
Right.
Andy Goldsworth, I haven't met, but I have seen his work around the world, especially in Norway. I saw very nice work too. Yeah, so I like Andy Gormley. And I have not yet seen the Angel of the North, but I want to.
Well, do come over and see Another Place as well.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
When I went to Mexico, I saw, the kind of nazarbattu we have, mirch and nibu. हमारे दुकान पे बांधते हैं. Mexicans do the same. Yeah, Mexicans do the same thing. So now I understand. I always wondered how come Mexicans took this tradition from India. Now I understand that the chilies and the tradition came from there. Thanks.
It could be the other way around, but chilies did come. It is a nice thing. I think I should create a. I don't know whether they were wearing the limbu and. Chops. Yeah, they do. Okay.
Thank you so much, Subodh. You have been wonderful in not only kind of creating your works, but also the thought which goes behind it. Yeah, it's so well connected. The first time when I saw his, works on the iPad, the way he shows them with so much of passion, dignity, with connectivity, and a lot of new media artists are doing things for the sake of doing. They don't really they are not able to explain the connection between what they are doing and what actually matters to them or means. They are just, because they've seen some exhibitions in Europe here and there, they pick up some elements, they think they are inspired, but it doesn't really make so much of sense as it does here with him. He's so well versed with what he wants to do and what he's doing. He's so well aware of what he's doing, about the times he lives in, the history and the future of the nation and the people in the globe. Thank you so much, Subodh. Thank you very much once again. Professor Goswami. And after that, we have prepared some memorabilia items, which he's been very kind to give us the copyrights for, free of cost, and they are there for those who want to keep them for posterity, because buying a sculpture which is ephemeral is very difficult. Professor Goswami.
It's not very common for me to start with a disagreement, but may I begin with that in the case of Subodh Kerkar. He made a remark that you can see that I am very casual. That's the furthest thing from the truth. He is not casual at all if you've followed what he was saying with any degree of care. Now, I'm sure just about everyone must have been struck by the layers of thought which make his work what it is. When I was listening to him and he's talking about chilies and lemons and so on and so forth, I was reminded of a wonderful book which many of you might have come upon or heard about, an old book called The Golden Peaches of Samarkand by a German art historian, Bertold Laufer. It's a delightful book, and all he does in that particular book is to trace how spices, vegetables, fruits traveled from one area to the other. And it reads like a thriller, an absolute thriller. It's a great book. And what comes out of that at the end is this, that there are no barriers. There are no barriers at all, no barriers that we need to respect, that we need to claim, that we need to set up. And what Subodh has done is an open and defiant and challenging acknowledgement of the fact that there are no barriers of any kind at all. Ideas come from here and there, and ideas go from here to there and come back and so on. It's all a great flux of thought. And that impresses me enormously. I sometimes wonder, I have in fact wondered frequently, would installations make the same impact if they were on a small scale? Scale is of the essence. If these extraordinary things that we have seen, and they are really quite extraordinary, and they are, of course, he's being a land artist, they have to be on that kind of a scale. But on a small scale, does an installation, is it capable of making the same impact as the scale on which he does his work? I would like an answer, not from him necessarily, but from my reading of installations as such and so on as an art form. The line that separates installation from performance is very thin, very, very thin. And there's only one performance thing that we saw, the donkeys and so on and so forth, which must have been a great entertaining event at the same time, moving in many ways. Land, Prithvi, in our own country from a very, very old time, ancient times, is by definition sacred. Millions of people, certainly the southern part of India, when they get up in the morning, I'm sure many of you are aware, they don't put your feet on the ground without begging pardon of land. Vishnu Patni Kshamasva Me Pad Kshepanam. You are the wife of Vishnu, Prithvi, and therefore forgive me if I put my feet on you. You are my senior, you are my goddess. I don't know whether you are aware of this, but it moves me each time when I hear this particular mantra which is recited. Subodh is a very uncommon artist, very uncommon. Yesterday I had occasion to talk very briefly about him, and I played with his name a little. Bodh, knowledge, wisdom, and to that if you add the prefix su, which means adding something to it, then we have a person like Subodh, who has not only wisdom, but who gives it elegance of form. And that I'm grateful for. Grateful for personally that I have had the occasion to visit his studio in Goa less than 2 years ago, and I was absolutely stunned by the kind of things I saw which he had done, and some photographs which he shared very kindly with us when we were visiting him. So it's a rare experience, and it's an elevating experience. Elevating because suddenly you become aware, what does art do? Essentially to expand the mind, to push horizons further back. And if looking at his art or seeing him work does that, then art has fulfilled its basic function in my thinking. How many of us, I wonder, when I was looking at his work, spend time looking at art, at a particular work of art? I sometimes lecture to school teachers in the CCRT in Delhi. They come from rural backgrounds, urban backgrounds, and I just asked them a question. Have you been to the National Museum as a part of your course here? Yes, we have. How much time did you spend in the gallery of paintings? 15 minutes. How many paintings were on the walls? 100. Out of those 15 minutes, did you look at paintings for all the 15 minutes, or did you for 5 minutes talk about this thing and that thing, how boring yesterday's lecture was, or how kachi the roti was which is given to you, or something like that? So in 10 minutes you have seen 100 paintings. Break it down. In 1 minute you have seen 10. Break it down further. You spent 6 seconds looking at a work of art, and you arrive at some kind of a judgment, or you decide, I like it, I don't like it. Sculpture and the kind of work which Subodh does, installations of that scale, have an inbuilt need, or they demand that you spend some time on them. Yesterday, when we saw his installation here, I said we should invite the audience or the people who are there to do a parikrama of it. Right? Go around it and see how dramatically it changes. The view from this angle to that, and so on. So time gets built into the act of viewing. So it is not an art of space, but also an art of time. And that makes it very, very special. And I'm grateful that he has brought his knowledge, his wisdom, his elegance of thought, and his capacity to think deeply to us. Thank you very much, Subodh. Thank you very much. May I just add one sentence towards the end? You know, the question about whether installations are ephemeral is a recurring question. I'm sure you have been asked, every installation artist asks the question. What do you do they last? Where do you store them? What do you do with them, and so on? And as he said, we are all temporary, here on this particular earth. But that reminds me of a very elegant formulation of a poet whom I did not have much regard for till I read this particular couplet of a Shakil Badayuni who wrote songs for films and so on. But one couplet sticks in my mind and comes to my mind now. Na fana meri, na baqa meri, mujhe ay Shakil na dhoondiye. Na fana meri, na baqa meri, mujhe ay Shakil na dhoondiye. मैं किसी का हुस्ने ख्याल हूँ, मेरा कुछ वजूद व अदम नहीं. Neither eternity is mine, nor this moment is mine. Don't look for me anywhere. I am just the beauty of somebody's thought. I do not exist, and yet I do exist. Installations have that character. Thank you very much.
I was joking with Subodh. He brought seashells to plant here in the clay, which is the kumhar's clay, which the potters use. I said, when I come to Goa, I'll take bhuttas from here. मक्की के भुट्टे ले जाके आपकी सैंड में लगाएंगे. जैसे आपने पोर्चुगीज से बदला लिया, हम आपसे लेंगे और साग भी लेके जाएंगे. Thank you.